timing.
Okay, so today is pretty much walking through an example day. All the stuff that we went over on the concepts we went over on Monday. Hopefully, you got had a little bit of time or chance in lab time the other day to review the a little bit of SQL because now we're ready to start working that into our PHP code. So the basic idea of what we're going to do, we saw the other day, we'll have some simple creation queries. Maybe create database, but sometimes on hosted sites, they don't like you to create the database. They'll create one for you and then you just use that. So definitely a lot of create tables. And then we'll insert and update data. And then obviously we're going to need to retrieve that data to use. So we'll also have a number of select queries. So we reviewed that the other day, and to tie it into our script, there's a couple more steps in the process. We'll connect to the database, connect to database, and either send values or query. We'll either put together a bunch of values to send to the database, to store, more insert or update stuff, or we're going to query and get some results back, run a select query. And then we'll put select results in an array. And then we just keep going back and forth. So these first things, what we reviewed the other day, and I guess the connection stuff as well, we'll be looking at that with MySQL. And the connection kind of overlaps. And these other things, that's where we're going to be working with PHP. There's somebody, oh, there's Brandon. Let him in. Hi, Brandon. We were just getting started. He wasn't quite in yet. Hi, Brandon. We were just getting started. So we reviewed all this the other day. We've been looking at PHP for the past couple of weeks. So we should be ready to tie these things together in an example and see how we're going to do this. Does anybody have any questions before we jump right into that? Okay, I assume the silence means
what's the last one? It says put select. I was writing that last one.
The results of a select query.
Okay, thanks.
So that's just the basic order of how we're going to do this stuff. So we're ready to kind of work it into our page because we reviewed all the concepts and the SQL syntax the other day. So, oh, there's something in the chat room. Oh. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and start pulling up examples. And did you all see the announcement I sent out this morning? The object-oriented stuff, I know that was new for a lot of people, and we went over it quickly. We just needed to cover it. So it seemed like a couple people had hit some stumbling blocks with the objects. And it kind of looked to me like the week 3 stuff where we were doing it, had the HTML files and then different PHP files and had it more separated, seemed to go a little bit better. And really, that's the way I tend to put the files together. So we've seen the object-oriented stuff, so I was going to and how we can put our pages together that way. So that gives us 2 options on how to do it. And next Tuesday, we're going to look at a 3rd option that will get us the same results. So different stuff in the background, but as far as the user can tell, it looks exactly the same. So we'll have we have multiple ways to put the same site together. And from here on out, you can use whichever one you are most comfortable with. If you really like the object-oriented stuff we did last week, you can add the new stuff into that. I'm going to go back to module 3 and make a new copy of that one before the object-oriented stuff to add in the parts from today. And then next week, we'll see a 3rd way to get the same results, basically. There's more than one way to do it, basically, to put a website together. And we just need to look at them. But between the object-oriented stuff last week and what we were doing before, it kind of looked to me like you all had a better feel for what we were doing before, a better feel of how the logic was going together and stuff. So I'm going to use that for the example. So I'm going to share my screen. And the first thing I want to do, though, is this is our first in-class example for the second half of the class. So I want to do a little cleanup if I can on the site pages. So XAMPP running. So I started up XAMPP, have the Apache server and MySQL server running. So we can run our PHP code on the virtual server and access the database to work with. Gotta have both of those up and running. And yeah, I guess I'll pull up the web page first, which seems to be going really slow to pull up. This page might do something eventually. It doesn't look like it's going to do anything, does it? I'm close that and try again. Zoom and browsers just don't seem to like each other much. They don't want to cooperate when both of them are running. There it goes. So I'll navigate into our example files and kind of take a look at it. So in class. So far this semester, we've been working on the same thing every in-class example. Same thing on programming assignments. And last week, we took the previous one and revamped that code into an object-oriented format for doing it. But you'll remember this site, the module 4 stuff, is essentially exactly the same as the module 3 stuff. I guess the only thing we actually added to it was that apology page for handling errors. Otherwise, it should be the same. Oh, almost the same. I just remembered there was that issue with the style sheet. So it looked like people had a better feel for that with it having HTML files and PHP files separate from each other and passing things back and forth in the forms. From looking at the homework, it looked like people had a better feel for that, but whichever way you were more comfortable with, go ahead and put your site together that way. There's more than one way to do it, and when we would decide, there would be a lot of questions we want to ask for making decisions. Because the end user sees the same thing, but it's like, where are our concerns at? Is security the biggest concern? Is the speed of the transmission, getting things from the server to the client, the speed the biggest one? Is like recovery if things go wrong and we have to go back and forth? Is storage the amount of space that all the scripts and things need on the server? Is that a big deal? We'd have a bunch of questions to ask to decide which one of the methods is the best. and we'll see a third one next week. So whichever one you're most comfortable with, you can use. For the class example, I'm going to go back and copy the module 3 one and just build on this one. So rename that as module 5_blue. I'll put -A. I'm like, we're gonna change it. But we do need to make a couple updates. First off, I wanted to see about cleaning some things up. I guess this one wasn't too bad. There was that one issue with the style sheet. I guess I better correct that. So if I go in the new version, should still look exactly the same, except the style sheet has, I think it was like a couple inches of padding. I'm not sure how that got worked in the style sheet, but it tried to put a lot of padding. I'll just edit that real quick. So the one here on my computer had 72-point padding. So several inches of padding. That probably should be like 12-point or 22-point, about the size of 2 letters at most, not 72.
Can you repeat that? How long did you say 2 letters, about the size of 2 letters is?
22 points. Letters are typical. This letter is going to be about 12-point size.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. Okay, 12.5. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Which I think, yeah, it's all I changed was the style sheet. And you might remember the first thing the browser looks at is the HTML. Whoops, not that button. So it noticed the HTML didn't change. So it's reloading the page from the cache instead of getting a new one from the server. And come in here, empty the cache, and hopefully it'll work this time. There we go. Got that little style sheet thing fixed. I'm not sure where that work came from, but the only thing we did was we revamped this code in module 4 to object-oriented PHP instead of separating our HTML and our PHP code. So for in-class examples, I'm going to go back to that full separation. It seemed to go a little bit better for the homework assignments seemed to come together a lot better.
Question for you, Chris, on that.
Yes.
For us operationally, what we're going to actually do with the SQL and the PHP, will there be any differences in what we'll do? So
Nope. I'm hoping that if like some of y'all might prefer this way.
So if we got the object-oriented stuff to work, either for this or for our project or whatever,
yeah,
there's no difference in which, if it works, we can use it. So,
yeah, if it works,
so if we got the
exact same lines of code will go into the PHP script.
Okay, cool. So it doesn't really matter. So the only reason we'd go back to the old one is if we couldn't get the object-oriented to work, then we say, well, forget that idea. We'll go back to what works.
Or if the object-oriented was just really confusing, because several people they got it to work, but from looking through the code, I could tell that it was still a little bit of confusion. There might have been some confusion there.
If I'm one of the confused guys, please tell me so I don't do it again. Thank you.
Oh, well, plus we had more practice this way. That might be another way to look at it.
Sorry.
We had 3 weeks of practice this way and only 1 week of practice with the object-oriented stuff. But the code will be exactly the same. We'll put the same code in there. I guess the only difference is usually with the PHP, the object-oriented one. The code started right at the top of the file, and then we just echoed it back to the page, sent it to the page at the bottom with the set content. Whereas in this method, there's all the HTML at the top of the file, so the PHP goes further down. It's kind of the only difference. It'll be the exact same lines of code. Does that help, Joe?
I guess. I mean, if there's no difference.
Yeah. no difference in them. Whoops, I didn't mean to close that one. I closed one of them I didn't mean to close. Reviews.php, open that back up. I was trying to close the things I wasn't going to need to, won't need the style sheet again. So we got the index page, the order page, the confirm page, the receipt, the reviews open, along with the script to post the reviews, and that little library. So the only thing that we really added was that apology page. So to do that, I'm just going to, in this style, I'm just going to make a copy of the index and put the apology on that. Rename that, and I'll call this apology.php. Then to edit that, we don't need a link that goes there, right? We don't want anybody going to that page on purpose. We just need to put whatever our little apology message was. I'm going to copy that from the stuff we did last week. I can navigate over to the module 4 stuff and just doing a little bit of cleanup, getting things ready for this next stuff. I'll open that, and the message was just this. I'm going to copy that and put that in the as the content for this page. So instead of having, so the logic is still the same. Instead of having that object that put the content there, I just manually put the content there. It's just little differences like that are what's going to be different between the object-oriented version and this version. And then next week, we'll see doing this in Ajax as well. But the logic of what we're doing, the PHP code and SQL code that we're typing will be typed exactly the same. The same words get typed. They just interact with each other in different ways, but that interaction is already set up for us in the object-oriented stuff, so we don't really have to do anything with it. And last week, to get to this, when we did the object-oriented version, we went ahead and reset the error handler in every single one of our files, which is kind of something I was going to change for the second half of the course. We saw during the first half, scattering the things around lots of files. There's lots of files with, some of them have just very few lines in them to keep things organized. Alternatively, we could put lots of stuff in one file and organize it that way, just an alternative organization method. So I was going to do that and put all the stuff into this one library file. And that way, whenever we ask for, do that require or include instruction, we only have to include the one file because everything is in there. We don't have to think through on every single page which ones we need or which ones we don't need or any of that. We just store everything in one file and only bring in that one file every time is an alternative one. So if you like that organization scheme and prefer the object-oriented method, you could just put your object here as well in the library with this reset error handler thing, and then these functions. And I'm going to put these on the clipboard real quick to make a point. So I'm going to take everything inside of those tags and hit copy, because when we bring that in, close this last one so I don't get confused about it. So like on the reviews.php file, we're going to add a PHP tag up here that says require once that library.php file and import that. And what really happens when we import stuff is the computer does that. It goes over there and reads that other file. So it's essentially like we typed all of that stuff right there at the top of the page. Does that make sense? So if it's written in the other file, we can just say require once or include
Because you
once.
said if we don't say require once, then it's just going to keep running. Did you say the same library over and over again, or is it going to keep finding different libraries? How was it that you said that if we don't do the once?
Oh, we have 4 different ways to import things. We can require or include, or require once and include once. If we just say require or include without saying once, the server will keep reading that library in every time reading that other file every time it needs something from it. If we say once, it only reads it in one time. But what I was doing different is instead of having lots of those other things that we might need in a bunch of different files, do any of them have it? Here's what's on the confirm page. There's an example of it over here in the Mod 4 thing, I think. So like the order page, I think, has several. Nope, it only had one. I was thinking something had it, but we might have, if we have things stored in several different files, we might have a whole bunch of those require things. Require once, require once.
What would be an example when we wouldn't want to use once?
It does the same thing. Well,
Okay.
what is different? So the word once there is showing up, but what I was referring to is that we only do it once. If all of our external stuff is organized in one script, we only need to read in one external file. But if we have that scattered around 10 or 15 different files, we may have to read in all 10 or 15, or put a lot of thought into which ones we need or don't need. So just an alternative organization. And that way we only have to put that import line one time, and it always imports the same thing. We don't have to stop and put a lot of thought into which stuff we want to import.
Oh,
And
thank you. Forgetting to push
yeah,
me.
and that has the error handling now. So I want to make sure that's in every single one. So the confirm page brings in the same thing. I'll put it here as well. Require once. Library.php. That's an HTML file. And it's already in that one. That's an HTML file. So we only have to put that in the PHP files because the HTML files are getting sent directly as the way they work. So I guess one thing, you might remember those other errors that were happening, the fatal errors we looked at on Tuesday, where those came because of problems in that PHP class in the blueprint would give us a fatal error that our error handling wouldn't handle. So doing it this way also avoids the potential of that happening. Is one other advantage of doing it this way. But if you get all those errors fixed, then it's not something you have to worry about, because that's not something that will happen at runtime. All of those will be fixed by the time you finish the debugging. And the way our pieces interact together, we still approach it with a sort of an object-oriented programming. It's just not that formal class structure, but we treat every page independently as its own thing. I guess I can check this real quick and maybe put a typo in the reviews page and make sure that error handling works. I'll put a typo there and click reviews. Oh. That's not where it's supposed to go. So you always want to check stuff. So this time the apology is just an HTML file. Let me try that again. If I go back and hit reviews, I can't find it. Did I save it in the wrong place? Oh. There it is. Okay, I had an
What
extra.
did you just change?
There was an extra extension. It was, for some reason, when I created it, I called it apology.php.html.
Okay, thanks.
I meant to just call it, it should have just been apology.html. So now that that apology page has been worked in, so if you prefer what we were doing the first 3 weeks and having seen that stuff from week 4, if you want to do it the other way, that'll be fine. Just please go ahead and work the apology page in there as well. That way the error handling is, errors are handled gracefully. The user never sees them. If there's an error, it shows up on this text file in the background for us and isn't going to cause the user to panic or anything. Yeah, so I gave the file the wrong name. Somehow I called it apology.php.html. I didn't really notice that I had done that. Don't save that. Just open it back up. Well, I guess I don't need to open it back up. There's not really anything changing on there. So some of these aren't going to change. I'm going to close out some of these. And yeah, I'll open them as we need them. So we're ready to start working in database stuff for us. So on the order page, we have all this set up. Just to remind you where it was, we put some sort of little message on to an ink pen, the little advertising type things, and people can order a bunch of ink pens. But that's advertising, right? If somebody orders 50 ink pens, hands all those out, and finds out that, well, they got a lot of phone calls because of the company name and number wrote on an ink pen, they're going to want to order more, right? And they're probably going to want to order the exact same thing. So that's what we're going to look at this week, is a repeat order button. For the bakery site and the homework, that was the little storyline that I threw in there. Is she noticed that people tend to order the same thing every time. So she wants you to put a repeat order button in, which makes sense with the pens as well, right? People are going to order pens with the same company name and message wrote on them. So we need a way to just repeat the order quickly instead of filling out the whole form again. And a great way to do that is with databases. So we're going to do it through databases. So let's look at what we have and figure out what we need to put in a database. So I'll go to the confirm page, because that has, whoops, double click on that, right click on that, and open that with the text editor. That way we can see all our variables and stuff, because this is where that stuff needs to go, right? After we put it in the database and bring it back, we need to pass it through this script again, or an exact copy of this script that has stuff coming from the database instead of that form, but it needs to be the same thing. So we need to get all of this information into a database somehow. And were these arrays? I think those were arrays, right? I might have to check. So in the library, they're calling a function from over in the library, so I'll go over there and check that. Okay, that looks like it's just returning the string. I was wanting to do something with an array. Because it is definitely unnumbered. I'll put the price stuff in. That gives us an array to put in there. Because those are a little bit different. But if we look through here, we got the price. That'll be an array. So we can store that. There's a number of ways we can store it in the database. The reason I wanted to make sure there was an array there is so we can store it as a blob. So let's just write that in binary, keep that in binary format, because if we send it to the database, we're sending it from an array. And when we get it back from the database, we still want it to be an array so we can work with it in the same way. So we'll just pass that in, pass the array in and store that as a blob instead of converting it to text or reading the stuff out of there and doing a bunch of transitions back and forth. We'll just store that in binary format over in the database. And our other stuff, so the logo, that'll be a string. Hex colors are actually 3 numbers, but we'll go ahead and store it as a string. That's the easiest way to store 3 numbers, and we can bring the string right back in. Most of this stuff is going to be just text characters and some numbers, but we need ways to store all of this stuff, the things they're going to order in a database so that we can repeat an order. So let's kind of put together a plan for it. And I'm going to use draw.io. I'm just going to go back to this. The Lucid Chart trial has ended. It was just there for, they gave me that upgraded account for a month to try things and give it a try. And I was not happy with the test run. Sorry about that. One of the things in my notes from the meeting with the sales lady, I jotted down free account student okay. I'm quite sure I asked her that question, make sure that the free account was okay, and it did not appear to be, did it? I didn't record the meeting, but it was in my notes to ask her that before the meeting, and in my notes from the meeting, it says free account student okay. So I'm quite sure that I asked her about that. But anyway, that trial was only open for a minute to give it a test run. They done downgraded my account again. I don't have enough money to go buying stuff. So I'm just gonna go back to regular draw.io and put together a UML here. I think everybody's seen these before. Yeah, so the people that were late getting that project turned in, the people that were a little late getting the project proposal stuff turned in, it may have already closed because, yeah, they only opened my account for long enough. I told them it was going to be in week 3, and they kept it open for a week after that and then shut it down. So our standard way, so our standard diagram modeling for anything in IT is unified modeling language, it's UML. And for databases in particular, we use entity relationship diagrams. That's the UML model we typically use to design databases. So if we go to draw.io and a new one, there's options for somewhere in the chart is the shapes for an entity, ERD. We usually just abbreviate that, which the diagram representing our database table. What are we going to call the table? Primary keys for it, the rows for it. And with that selected, with these in particular, here in draw.io, we have the button up here so that we can maybe delete rows or insert rows back in there, insert row above. And that way everything, it still keeps that model as one shape. We don't have a collection of different things. There's still just one shape. So we can edit rows in and out and put all our information here. So what are we going to need to do this? Right? We'll need users, because we can't just make repeat order completely arbitrary. Right? People wouldn't know which order, whose order they're looking at, or how to find their own order on the list if we just showed people every order and said to repeat it. So we want to be able to identify the user. So I'm going to make a customers table. And back in your DBMS 110 class, the primary key, that's something, a unique identifier for every record on that table. And often they'll be used as a foreign key, and we'll need it to be used unique when we access that from joined tables as well. We saw join queries the other day. So in your DBMS 10 class, that might have been a little tricky at times, finding that unique ID, figuring out what the unique ID was going to be. And if you don't have a unique ID, you won't get all the functionality from the database for that table. So if you don't have something, just have the computer auto increment an integer is a good form to do that. But on the website, if we're doing web stuff, do we have a unique way to identify everybody on the web?
Do they have an account ID?
Well, they will. We're going to set up the account ID. But is there something about that user that we could already use that we know everybody has a unique version of?
Well,
An IP address?
Well, there is the email, but the problem with an email is it can change, and that's the problem we came up with in DBMS 110, which is why we didn't use it. But as long as you don't change your email address, because if your primary key is going to change, then suddenly you're up a creek without a paddle, and that's the only problem. When people change providers, or that's the only issue. But if we want to stipulate for this class and for our example that our people are not going to change their email address, then we could use it.
Yeah, and typically in the when we're making websites, we just ask the user for their email, and if they change their email, they need to set up a new account. Because there's going to be more than that, right? Even if their email is not the primary key, we lose their account information. We can't contact them, right?
If you have an alternative way for them to verify that they're them, and if the email address is just another key, another thing in the table that can be updated.
Oh, it can still be updated. You can update primary keys.
I know, but it screws things up. But it screws things up.
Yes, but still, it's standard. That's the standard to use, because everybody has to have if they're on the web, they probably have an email, but it's when we set up accounts, that's what we use, right? Like when we gave that Lucid chart thing a try, that's what they wanted every time. To log in, they ask for your email. So it is fairly standard to just use email on any of our web stuff. It could be an issue if you're, just a general database. I can see that being an issue because if you're not doing like internet stuff, you might have a lot of customers that don't use emails. But I'm just going to put it in there for email. Something has to be there.
So once you set up the account and use the email, because I know that there were some other issues with the email too, that Tim was talking about. Then once they get an account number, can we make the account number the primary key and the email the foreign key? Not really, because I guess it could be two. Can you, Joe? Could we have two primary keys, or it was one primary key? And I thought I remembered we could have like stacked primary keys. I can't.
You can have a compound primary key, but that gets messy because you don't know how
Okay.
the primary key until
Yeah.
you need the address. So I think if you're going to do something like this, what Chris is doing is the right thing to do.
Okay.
Yeah, there's always going to be advantages and disadvantages to stuff, and the email has just become standard anymore. If somebody's on going to a web page, it's safe to assume they have an email account. So we just use that. But you can do it whatever you want. You can set it up any way you want to. You just have to have something to uniquely identify every record. And if you use arbitrary data to uniquely identify all the stuff, for example, this is why Amazon uses only your email instead of an account number. Because think about how many customers Amazon has. That's billions and billions and billions of customers. So if you just gave every one of them a random 5-digit number, no, billions of customers, they have to have a random 9-digit number, right? So we can do that math. If
That'd be harder for me to remember too, as a customer.
Yeah, let's say Amazon has 2 billion customers. I'm pretty sure they have a lot more than that. And every one of them has to have it's up in the billions, so they have to have a 9-digit number to identify them. So every one of them needs 9 digits to identify. And each digit, just because I know how Amazon set up their stuff, it's going to be 32 bits per digit. It's going to be a 32-bit integer. So to do Amazon account numbers like that, we'd have 18 times 32. Can round that to 20. I'm going to round that, say 20 times 30 to make the math easier. 20 times 30 is 600 billion bits just on those account numbers. And on top of that, they also still have to keep everybody's emails. So all those people's email addresses are in there, taking up tons and tons of data on the servers, but then another 600 billion bits that are just an arbitrary number to keep track of the accounts. That's a lot of data, right? So typically, it's fairly standard just to use the emails, but everything has drawbacks. There are advantages and drawbacks to no matter what we choose. So you just kind of have to dig through and figure out what works best. I go with emails because that's become standard. It is actually easier on my part just to put an integer there. But then we need a couple things about emails. And also along this, next week, we're going to set up accounts. So I was going to go ahead and set up the account for that as well. Go ahead and put it in the database. We're going to need a box so that they can type their email address in. But next week, we'll be doing secure logins. So they'll need an email and a password. And a password is just going to be a string, right? So go up to 32 characters. Whoops. And we probably don't want to address them by their email though, right? When we write our custom message there in the receipt, thank them for the order, we're going to throw their name in there. So maybe add in a name field to tell who's who. Archer 32. And That's probably enough for the customers table, right? We just need to know who they are. We won't see passwords until next week, but we know it's coming, so we might as well go ahead and put it in there now. So I don't even need that last row. I can go up here and delete that from the symbol. So that's what one of the tables will be, just who's placing the order. There'll be an issue we'll talk about with the passwords and the way we store passwords, because we don't want to just store passwords in written form, right? Actually, I'll talk about it now. It's just a string of text, but if we store that without encrypting it, that kind of counts as a big security issue, right? And in particular, the browsers will try to do a little bit for it, but they can't do much. You all might remember a couple years ago, it was in the news and stuff about security issues, and some congressmen got involved and contacted Google and several other the big names we know, demanding things be done about security and getting all aggressive like congressional party members do in election years, and yelling at Google and stuff about security. And you know, their Google, they were like, we're just the ones that put ads on the page. We don't have anything to do with that. But they still got that way. So the browser makers that were getting yelled at by Congress that day that had nothing to do with it had to do something. And one of the things that they, that they can do is they have a bot. If there's a place to log in, they have a bot pass in a password. And they're like, oh, wait, what did I just send you? And if it comes back unencrypted, you get a message that says there was a security breach, which that's about all Google can do. Because a lot of times for somebody's website, they have the same access the user does. So if the password gets stored without encrypting it, you'll see a message pop up on your site saying there was a security breach. So we'll want to encrypt that when we store a password. But that's something that's coming soon. And our other table, this is the one that needs to match the order form. So our other table will be orders. And for this, this is probably a good one for just the ID, right? Or just a number for the ID. For those who just had the class recently, like you were talking about a moment ago, Joe, is there something, does it seem like there's anything else that would make a good unique ID primary key on here?
The only thing you could assume is if a person only made one order at most in a day, if you had some sort of way of shorthand figuring out the customer and the day, you could do that to make a key. But other than that,
yeah,
that's
so
rough.
That's a great version, because what the point I was going to express is, if you have to think for more than a split second about it, just use an integer. If it requires a lot of thought, until you get up to something like what I put on the board there, right? You know, if you're like Amazon and have billions of customers, then you might need to start worrying about extra data in your database, because that's going to add up billions and billions and billions of times. But for most purposes, if you have to start thinking and it's going to be any complicated, just put an integer in there. And I usually what I always do is give it the same name as the table with ID tacked on the end. So order ID will be an integer, auto increment. I'm not even going to type that integer in. I'm going to let the computer keep track of it. And now for our data, we'll go ahead and fill some stuff in. Right. And when I do this, I usually look at the early draft of the script. and just bring the data right in the type it needs to be in. And since I don't seem to have any arrays here, I did want to put it there. I know there's arrays in the homework assignments. So I'm going to go ahead and put the price in there, and we'll just store that the same way, just to see an array. So I just come over here and give it the same, I'll give it the same name. Well, first off, we need the foreign key, don't we? We need to know who placed that order. So first off is email, and to match it, do variable characters. And the next one, that variable price, which we could probably get away without putting that in the database, but I don't have any other arrays. And for arrays, I find it easiest just to put them into blobs. Did y'all see blobs in your DBMS 110 class?
No, I don't remember that.
Don't remember any blobs.
Binary large object. So that is, we're just going to store it in binary code. So we have an array in PHP, which, remember, the text stuff is just for our benefit. The computer knows that as a bunch of binary representations. So we're just going to have the computer store that binary representation and then give it right back to us, because when it gets back to our script, we still need it as an array. So anything else, we'd have to do a whole bunch of extra steps in order to store it. We'd have to pull all the strings out of the array, organize and send them to the database in an organized format. And then it's going to come back and do it in the same way. And this database is specifically to be connected to our website. So we know we're always going to be looking at it from the web page. Not, maybe the site admin will see it from the back end. But for the most part, we're always going to see it after running through that PHP code. So we can just save the binary of the array in basic binary format. We'll use the serialize function, write that in binary format, and then when we go to read it back, we'll unserialize it, and that way it's a PHP array. So yeah, essentially it's a spot to store binary, and we're just going to store a PHP array there. That way we don't have to do any fancy conversions to get back and forth between them. Hopefully make it a little easier that way. And yeah, this is usually have at least a test run put together, so I'll know what data I need and everything. And just kind of go through here and look at it. So logo, I guess jumping ahead a little bit, come week 7, we might make the logo a picture, but right now that's just words. So over in our database, we just need to place some words to put there. So the third thing, I'm gonna give it the same name, and I'm just gonna put it in as maybe a little more than 32, varchar 128. So not as big as a text field, but on an ink pen, they might want a lot of words there, right? Because we could fit quite a few words down the side of an ink pen. But I'm just looking at the pen here and guessing that probably not more than 128 characters and it still be readable. What do y'all think? Think that'll be big enough?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, and that's sometimes it's just, use your best guess, and if you have to make that bigger later, we can always come back and adjust it. If it's not enough,
you were talking about the 128 on the varchar, right? Or
yes.
were you talking about how big the font is? Okay, yeah, I think 128 might. How many characters? I mean, that's gonna do that's gonna cover a lot. Okay.
Yeah, because our just generic text field is 255, but usually we don't want to store 250, leave space for 255 characters. So our varchar is only going to use.
That would be using up RAM, even if it was. Would it use up the RAM if I wanted that varchar to be 250? If most people only use 128, would it use up more memory or on the RAM just having that available, or would it not matter?
Oh, the varchar won't use it if they don't use it, if they don't put that many characters in.
Okay.
That's why we use varchar instead of text. if we say text, it's 255 characters every time. But if we say varchar 128, and then they only give us 5 characters, we only use 5 characters.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, so variable number of characters is what that stands for. So it changes to fit our needs and doesn't waste space. What else do we have here? The color, and technically hex colors are 3 integers, but it's a lot easier to deal with them as a string, right? You might remember that sometimes we do work in binary, but working directly in binary is really hard. So we have that abbreviation for it. And when we work in hex, we're working in binary. We're just working in binary 4 bits at a time because we're humans and we can handle more than ones and zeros. I'm going to come up here to the little table thing and add a row in. Insert row after, and go ahead and add in color. Whoops. I think I got an extra space in there. I guess it won't hurt. And again, I'm going to store that as a varchar, which actually we only need 7 digits for that, right? We have the hash symbol. Then we have 2 for the red, 2 for the green, and 2 for the blue. So we only need 7. But personally, I always put 8 because it bothers me to see a not computer number there, right? One extra spot's not going to hurt much there. And if it's varchar, it's not even going to use it really. But we only need 7 for a color, but I always put in that 8th one. Oh, somebody got a bad connection. Oh, Tiff might have a bad connection again. And then we'll just go through here and check all these. So like a grip. Do we have a rubber grip on there or no grip? And that's a string, but that's a very special type of string, right? That's not just any string like the logo would be. The logo is going to be whatever the user gives us. But with the grip, there's only 2 versions of string that could be. That's either going to say grip or no grip. So we don't need just we don't need the ability to enter any string whatsoever. We only need those 2 strings. So once again, I'll insert a row in the plan. And I was hoping to be done with the planning part by 2 o'clock, and it looks like that's 1 minute away. So, a little behind my plan here, but that should be okay. So I'm going to match the PHP to make it easier, because when we get this back from the database, we'll have into the PHP, we'll have an associative array, and all of these field names will be the indexes. So I find it easiest to have the same index as the variable I'm putting it into. You could do that differently if you chose. That's just what I found is easiest for organization and keeping the things straight, is make sure those match. So like I drew up an ERD for the programming assignment instructions, but if your variables are named something different than mine, go ahead and use what you named your variables. And that way everything matches. Makes it just a little bit easier to keep track of it all. And grip was a string, but it's only 2 possible strings. It's not any possible string. So did you all see Enum in your DBMS 110 class?
I don't remember that either. Do you, Joe?
Is that where the Booleans go?
An enum it's short for enumerator. It's a common tool we have to work with in programming. It's a short list, basically, an enumerated list. So we'll take here, we only have 2 options. So we're basically going to shorten from storing any string to we're going to store string number 1 and string number 2. So it's a restricted list. It stands for enumerator.
So that's what I'd use for a character type if I had a male versus female or yes or something like that, where I had a very short list. Or
Yes,
even if
male
I had,
versus female is the traditional one. I was avoiding that
well, I know,
particular
but
one.
okay, now can that, is it only when you only have two choices, or can,
As many as you want. It's
so
a
if I, so,
restricted
so,
list.
so if I had A, B, C, and D, that would be more of an enumerated list rather than a character of one.
Yeah, yeah. You could cut it. You could have a list of 10,000 things, but 10,000 is still a restricted list compared to any possible string we could enter, right? For our purposes, just a couple things. So we only have those two options, which are strings. Our enum could be integers, booleans, whatever that list is. Just the way this example came together, both our options are strings. But it could either say grip or it could say no grip. And it's just that restricted list. So the type of that's enum. And then blob is binary large object. Only the server admin will ever see the backside of this database. So we're not even going to bother with the human readable form. We're just going to save it in binary code. You probably didn't see that in the DBMS 110 class. Most people don't. And then enum is a short list. I think we have another short list too, don't we? Oh yeah, the metal checkbox. It says metal clip or plastic clip.
You said you call it a short list. How large can it get? How many items can you put in a short list?
A lot. You can keep adding them because without restricting the list, it's infinite, right? So anything is short compared to infinite.
True.
But yeah, you probably as many as you need, and then only those values can. So when we go say insert into and then our values, and we pass in a string, we can only insert the value if it's one of those two strings. It helps to block out bad data. Oops. And I'm going to select that last row so I can click the insert another row afterwards. And the little metal clips on ink pens are the same way. Either has a metal clip or a plastic clip, right? At least in the setup we have here. So again, we could do that with an enum. Clip. We'll set up an enum, and it's either going to be metal.
Quick question on these enums. Okay, so I know that, and I might be confusing arrays and lists here. I am confusing myself. But I know that you generally have to stay on the same data type with with an array. So this is under an orders table. So I'm assuming all these are going to be the orders for the customer. So if they make another order, then it's going to automatically populate into these lists. Is that true? Is that correct? It would.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It'll be another row in the table.
Another row. So that's where my next question was going to come from, because it looks like right now you're adding everything in specifically about the pen, but if they wanted, I don't know if they're going to sell steno pads or anything like that, that would have to be on another one, because it looks like everything in there is specifically related to that pen, or if that's just what we're.
That's all our example has.
Okay.
Okay, now question on that. My primary key is the oh no, that is auto increment. Okay, so that's going to be a separate row, and then so then I guess if they go to searching for their order, they hit the order. You'd want an order date or something so that you could tell what the last one was.
Yes. Don't we have a delivery? Didn't we put a date in here?
We put some sort of. I know on Becky's we had an order date, or when do you want it? That's where we were. We had a.
Oh, I thought we did put a date in here. Let's put a date in here.
That's a good point, because they may be a one of those customers that you've been having for years and years. That way they can go back and look at a specific time frame, right? Is that what you mean by that, Joe?
Yeah, I thought we did have a date in
Yeah,
here.
yeah, no,
So
we,
the
we,
last thing
well,
we
yeah,
need is,
we didn't need a date for the pens because you get them when you get them.
yeah, the,
But baked goods, you say, well, what day do I want the baked goods? Because you don't want it Tuesday if your party's not till Friday.
exactly. Yeah, so let's go ahead and add the date field in.
Okay.
That'll just take a second, right? So we also have a quantity, which is going to be an integer. And that's just how many batches of pens they ordered. And then, like you pointed out, Joe, a date field is a good thing. Order date. Is we have a bunch. I'll go with date time. I default that to now. If it's the order date, we can just let the database handle it, kind of like auto increment, right? Or we could pass it in when we ask for it. But I'll pass it in from the PHP. That way we can see it. But that would be just like auto increment. If we're just saving their order date, we just have the database handle that. It's like, okay, whenever we added that row to the table, go ahead and put the date on there. But since we're, we'll see that it may make a good example to see how just like HTML dates pass directly into the PHP dates with no special tricks pulled out of our sleeve, right? It just went right in. The PHP date will go right into a MySQL date. We don't need anything special about it. So I'll just use that. Thank you for pointing that out, Joe. I thought we did have dates on there for some reason. But yeah, it makes sense that we don't. So it looks like email is going to be our foreign key here, right? FK, and then the rest of what I need for this is back here. So we can connect the email primary key from the customers table to the foreign key. And
how did you just do that to make it look so pretty?
With nothing selected, I hovered my mouse over this field, and notice there's a dot and an arrow. I just clicked on the arrow and drug that over there until it snapped in place on the dot by the foreign key field.
I've learned more about Draw.io in the last 30 minutes than I have the entire time I've been at Ivy Tech, which is the only time I've ever used Draw.io.
Oh, and any schematic software will work that same way. So you have, whenever you hover over it, you'll see a dot or a little asterisk or something. That's what you connect to, and the arrow is connect from. So just unselect everything, hover over it, and grab the arrow and drag it to the dot that you want it to connect to. And then it's a database thing, so there's a special, we really don't want that type of arrow, right? We want that arrow to say what our relationship is. So why did my picture do something strange here?
I don't know. It happened when you were trying to drag your arrow thingy.
Delete that row. Yeah, and if you use this, then all that stays together as a picture. Yeah, I don't know how I accidentally duplicated that, but customers, one customer, is it, how many orders can a customer place? Is it one-to-one?
Anywhere from, well, yeah, 0 to many.
Yeah.
Technically, I guess you could have a customer who hasn't ordered yet. Technically. So it won't be
that's true.
many, but
so it's a 0 to many or 1 to many. It wouldn't be a many, right? We can't have lots of customers placing the same order.
No.
So on the arrows, the box on the left is, well, if we hover over it, it says line starts. and we went from customers to orders. So the start of the line needs to be our one side, which is the vertical line one. And then the line in, instead of an arrowhead, we want the mini symbol, which is right behind my controls. How do I get those out of the way? Oh. There it is. And then there's the side for the mini. And on Draw.io, I always feel like I can't see it, so I make the line bigger. There's the line size, and there's the size for the little endpoints. Make sure it's clear. And then colors. If we click on the table and set in a gradient for like, I don't know, red, that'll work. Set in a gradient for that same red color. That way the tables match. And maybe make this a different color. Green line, yeah. Red line with red tables with green connection between them. But does everything there for the plan for the database make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so
I still don't know if I understand Enum though and Blob until I have to look at that stuff some more. Do we have to use it? And I mean, I want to learn it, but do we have to do
you could, however it just has to work.
Okay.
Yeah, just do something that works. This is the way I do it because before we send an array, it's in PHP code. And when we do anything with this data, we're going to turn that back into a PHP array. So it just adds a lot of extra steps to convert that to something else to go in the database. We can just store it in the binary code, store the binary code of a PHP array, and then bring back the binary code of a PHP array. And then we don't have to do any extra steps because we never actually need that readable.
That makes sense why we probably hadn't heard it yet, because you say it's specific to PHP.
Oh,
or
no, that's just binary code. I usually do images that way.
Okay.
We're going to probably just do links, but a lot of times I'll put images in there. I just stick an image in the database and to store that.
Endless number of images, right?
Just an image. If I have a picture I want to store, I'll just store the binary code for that image in the database as a blob.
I know it's got to be easier if you're doing it. Okay, I'll be quiet. I'm watched.
But that's the idea for our table. So some strings, it matches our data. The same, I like to use the same names for the fields as I use for the variables, and the same types, the strings, or if it's something fancy, an array or an object, custom object that I put together for the page or something fancy, I'll just store it in binary format. Or integers or dates. And if there's a short list, I like to put it in enums, because then we only have that short list it could be. Any questions about that structure for that? I'll leave that open so we can refer back to it. And 2:15. So I'm going to do one thing before taking a break. The first thing we're going to do after a break is create this table and then use our order form, place some test orders to make sure everything to load stuff in. So first thing we're going to do is load in from the order form. So our order form needs an email, right? We won't get to secure login until next week. Next Thursday is when we'll cover actually logging into the site. So for right now, we just need an email input so the user can tell us who they are when they place the order. It's sort of a temporary solution to that. So I'm going to open up the order form. And right at the top, I'll add an email box. Another paragraph up there. I'll put the label email, input type equals email, name equals email. That works for everything there. And that way, until we get to the user login, actually logging in next Thursday, the user can just type that in. So then over in our confirm script, and if you prefer the object-oriented one, like you made a copy of the module 4 stuff to follow along here instead of the module 3 stuff, like I did, your order form is probably in a separate file, so that's going to go in exactly the same. And then wherever you have the confirm, we just need a place to put that email. We'll have an email coming back equals, our post array has something called email in it. So we'll put it in there. And I'll add to the string customer their email address, and then the order. So I just, put a input type equals email, load that into the form, and then I just added that onto the string to make sure it's all working. That should all be things we've seen before, right? So reload the page. Can I save it? Why is it not loading? There it is. Okay, didn't notice the change. So that gives us just one more box to type into. And we'll need test users. So when I set up the database, I just made up a few names, and then I put like all their email addresses is that name at here.com. My pins and some sort of color form. And click pins with a rubber grip. Order 3 of them or 4 of them. However many times I click there, then hit order. And we can see that email came through there fine. So we'll be able to, we just need a way to get that into the database when we place an order for now. Any questions about that? So thus far, it's all cleanup and planning, getting our copy of the previous version organized, ready for the next version, and then looking through it, seeing what databases, what data fields we have in our form and PHP script, and duplicating those over in the database with some sort of type. And the question did come up, you do not have to do this the exact same way I do. If you have, everybody here knows about working with databases. So if you know what will store that data in the database, that'll be fine. This is the way I tend to do it. The main thing is make sure every table has a primary key. I like emails, and that's virtually becomes standard on web stuff, just to use the email. And if you have to think for even more than a split second, just throw an integer in there. If it starts to seem like it's going to be complicated at all to get a unique thing, just auto increment an integer and let the computer worry about it. That way you do have full functionality from the database. Any questions? If not, looks like it's probably a good time to take 10 minutes before we put that database together, and then put data in it and bring data back from a PHP script instead of a MySQL interface. All right, so let's take 10 and we'll meet back here at 2:30. And I'm going to stop the screen share and stop the recording and go get me some coffee.